When it was announced that I was made the head of sales, I remember one guy getting up and picking up his chair and throwing it across the room.
And if you don't see someone leading, go lead. And I think that ties with imposter syndrome, because we might wait around for that validation. But at some point in time, I would just raise my hand and say, I'll do it. If no one else is going to do it, I'll do it.
I believe imposter syndrome was formulaically created by the patriarchy to insist that women have syndromes when they're uncomfortable.
It's so interesting because as an HR professional that has been working in a global environment for very long, where you found women from, different countries, different cultural backgrounds, different life experience, is that this becomes a common theme.
Welcome to the Pubway podcast. Each episode will showcase a conversation with a leader from the publishing world. If you're working at a publisher, a DSP or SSP, or you're just curious about the media industry and want to sit down and pick the brains of the experts from within the publishing space, then this is the show for you. Hello, and welcome to the Pubway podcast. My name is Tina Iannacchino. I'm thrilled to present a special episode today to help celebrate International Women's Day 2025. This year's theme is Accelerate Action, which is a call to move beyond discussion and drive real change for gender equality. I'm joined by a panel of impressive and inspiring women today. Today we have Jackelyn Keller, the CMO of Comscore out of the USA. We have Natasha Byrne, the Global Business Lead at Omnicom Media Group out of the United Kingdom. We have Samantha Ski, the CEO of SheMedia, also out of the USA. And of course, we have Luisa Izquierdo, the Chief HR Officer here at Seedtag, based out of Spain. Welcome, ladies. Love to have you on today. To dive into the conversation, I would love to start with something that's very near and dear to a lot of our hearts, which is breaking barriers and redefining leadership. As we know, there's so many challenges we all face as women, lessons we learn, and of course, pointing out things that still do need to change. And when in regards to the barriers in leadership, I would love to hear some of the more significant barriers that you've all had to overcome as women in leadership and how specifically you could push forward. Natasha, I would love to start with you. I feel like you've had an impressive career. Not feel, I know from your background. You've had a very impressive career in media. And of course, coming from the international lens, you can see there's a lot of similarities that go across the pond as well that we all experience as women. I'd love to hear from you if any specific moments in your career has really stood out.
It's been a long time, I started in media 23 years ago when Google was only 5 years old. So I think I was about 5 years old when I started my career. I think the biggest barrier that I ever had was when I was working in a male-dominated industry. I was in the finance industry. I was selling advertising, and I'd just been made promoted to head of sales at the time. And my whole team was men. There were only a few women within the company. One was in HR, one was in reception, and one was the PA, and that was it. And when it was announced that I was made the head of sales, I remember one guy getting up and picking up his chair and throwing it across the room. And yeah, I know, all this shock. This was about, I think, 14, 15 years ago. So at the time, I think things have moved on since then. But I remember at that moment in time, my reaction, even though it was shock, was also do not react like a woman. Do not show emotion. Do not show any kind of leadership qualities that might make these men sit around and go, she reacted like a woman. She leads like a woman. How can she be our leader? And I just stood up calmly and said to him, get up, calm yourself down, walk around the block, and we'll talk about it later. And I think when I reflect on that now, that's really shaped the early years of my leadership, because I was quite scared to be a woman in how I was a leader. And I saw empathy and emotion might be seen as weak. But as I've grown older and in more roles, I found actually that now I see them as my superpower. It's those are the things that actually can help us influence and grow people and make people want to work for you as well. But at that time, it was seen as a weakness. My second one is really imposter syndrome. I've recently changed jobs. I've been in my job for 4 months. I was in my last role for 10 years. I was the managing partner at another agency group and now global business lead at another agency group. And I was terrified. It was debilitating how scared I was to make the change, because I kept saying, what if I'm not good at what I do? What if it's all lies, and that actually when I come to this new job, they're going to realize I'm crap and that they're just going to get rid of me? It's the best thing I've ever done. I passed my probation, but it was, so it was the best thing I've ever done. But I think even at my level, I have that imposter syndrome. And I think it's something that every woman has to try and overcome.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because the fairest sex, as we're known willingly or unwillingly, we're known to be the more emotional one. Where in clearly this instance, they were the more emotional one. And I love that you were able to keep a level head and approach it from a logical standpoint while aware of all the other kind of factors around you and what we're susceptible to. And then for the imposter syndrome, unfortunately, I feel like that's something all of us experience no matter what level you are at in your career. I feel like when you see a job on LinkedIn, unless you hit every single qualification, you do not apply. But a man might see one of them and think he has a chance. So I think it's definitely super common. And I mean, Jackelyn, you were nodding along a lot. I feel like you have an example as well to share.
Yeah, like just when you say imposter syndrome, I think we've all, to your point, Tina, we've
Yeah.
experienced that. And I was I was smiling because I was like having flashbacks from watching Barbie, that scene where she's like, be thin but not too thin, show emotion, but not too much
Yeah.
emotion. So it's just like, what is the playbook to kind of succeed in this like largely male dominated world, especially if you're in finance? And I think a lot of it comes down to the control that we have, because we can't really control our environment. And that's something I've learned in my journey, is control what's in your control. And if you don't see someone leading, go lead. And I think that ties with imposter syndrome, because we might wait around for that validation. And maybe that's our own experience or our own trauma. But at some point in time, I would just raise my hand and say, like, I'll do it. Like, if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it. And I had this fantastic breakfast. This was years ago, early in my career. It was called Ani at the time, but it's now She Runs It. But there were these VIP like auction where you could literally just like auction to have breakfast. And I would save my money to just get these interactions with these leaders. And the CEO of BBDO, I asked him for advice, and he said, if you see a fire, run towards it. And I remember thinking, well, that's weird. That literally like kind of became something that inspired me. Like, I am such a problem solver, it gives me great satisfaction to solve problems. So if I see a fire, run towards it. And he's like, you will be invaluable. And I recall when I was leaving a job during the champagne toast, one of my male allies actually said, Jackelyn, when I think of her, it's like on the subway, if you see something, say something. And I think that was across the board in my career, not just in terms of doing the work, but also like speaking up for what I believe is right. So going back to what you said, Natasha, about imposter syndrome, because I think we've all been there. I've spent a fair share of time crying in bathrooms. I was talking to my 8-year-old the other day because she had big feelings, similar to what sounds like a 40-year-old man. In your case, big feelings that she was trying to kind of process. And she's like, Mommy, I left. I went to the bathroom. I had the feelings, and then I went back and I dealt with the situation. And I was like so proud of this 8-year-old girl who's doing something that I was doing probably at 35, trying to like navigate these feelings. And are you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with Masterclass, but it was gifted to me by a friend a couple holidays ago, and I fell in love with it. It's almost, instead of reading the whole book, you could get snippets, snackable content. But James Clear has this book called Atomic Habits. And in one of the chapters, he talks about how we basically reinforce stories and narratives about ourselves. And the example he gives is someone walks in and a person offers him a cigarette. And he goes, no, I'm quitting smoking. And then another person walks in and he's also offered a cigarette. And he said, no, I'm not a smoker. And he said, this could be the same person, 2 different responses. And it's that story that you're telling yourself that reinforces the belief that you can do something or you can't do something. So I think for me, and a lot of, I would say, like, not my partners in crime, but a lot of friends and females and even men in the industry, if they're feeling that imposter syndrome, I think we have to believe it. We have to believe in ourselves. And I think that it's really, really important to see it around us. And I think we'll get into this, Tina, a little bit later, but that you can't, it's hard to imagine you being something that you don't see. It's like the first Barbie I ever bought for my daughter. It was after their rebrand. I waited. I was like, not going to buy Barbie until they fixed their ways. It was an astronaut Barbie, the first woman from the USA to go to space. And that was her first kit. And just my little one, my Stevie's younger sister, Riley, the other day was saying, like, Mommy, I think I might be an astronaut. Like, Stevie got the Barbie, but I want one too. And I loved that, because it maybe it's cliche, but it's true. In order to see it, I hope that in their lifetime, in my lifetime, we'll have a female president in the USA. So I think that imposter syndrome, part of it is it's because we're not seeing that around us. And I think part of it, it's what we can control. It's within us. How can we tell ourselves stories that, like, I can do this. I'm going to raise my hand. And it takes a level of vulnerability to do that. But I've seen success in that.
Absolutely. And Sam, I feel like your facial reaction to chair throwing was my favorite.
Yeah, the chair. I was like, you want to throw a chair? I'll throw a table, and
Yeah.
much less mature than Natasha. Yeah, that would be a hard one to react. That is wow. I low key want to know that person's name, but that's like a little more.
If he heard this podcast, he'd be looking on my LinkedIn going, I hope you haven't said who it is.
Sending this podcast as a very, very clear and open threat. Just kidding. But no, that's horrible behavior. I think I wouldn't have had the wherewithal to have walked out of the room, and probably would have thrown something larger. But that is not good advice. So something I read about, this isn't my concept, but I'm very compelled by it. The idea of reframing imposter syndrome as imposter phenomenon. And that is because I believe imposter syndrome was formulaically created by the patriarchy to insist that women have syndromes when they're uncomfortable. You can just PMS and how well that's been weaponized. But it's not that you're walking in a room and people are being unreceptive to you. It's that you've got a syndrome. You've got something going on and you're confident. Sorry, it's probably deep in your childhood that causes you to feel inferior. Instead of there are rooms you guys walk into, you probably don't feel like imposters on this call because people respect you and recognize your power. There are a lot of rooms you walk into, metaphorically or in reality, where the head fake, especially from privileged men, is going to create a dynamic in which you are made to feel like an imposter. So I think I'm down with do you like that? I liked it too.
Yeah,
It's not a sickness to cure. It's like,
right.
This is real.
It's a phenomenon. It's like a societal thing. And everyone in that dynamic has something to do with that feeling that you have or that I have. And I feel like it's a little more empowering because it's a little bit we got to, woman up and change how we think about ourselves. But also the dude across the table might want to contemplate how he's reacting to the people who enter the room. But, if you get to own X% of the power, you're going to have the ability to cause identity shifting for the others. And I think that's true of, when I'm in a room and have maybe more power than others who aren't privileged white ladies. There's an obligation there as well to recognize the difference in how we're entering that space. So that's just something that's been occurring to me lately, is that it's not us alone who create that. We aren't imposters. We are often made to feel like imposters because, as you guys have beautifully articulated, it's not someone like me across the table often.
I love that because it talks about how we're humans and we're connected, and it's the community and the ecosystem that you're sitting within. And that's going to impact psychologically. If anything, if women are feeling that they're imposters, it's because we're reading the room and we're picking up on those social cues.
And also because we're smart and emotionally connected. And straight up, I'll just generalize about an entire gender, more likely to be empaths, empathetic. And we can read that room. We know what you think. And again, further for those who are, men or women who are further marginalized from the core sort of majority. And so I think it's owning your responsibility, if you're in power, to what are you bringing to that dynamic? So that is just something I've been.
Yeah. No, listen, ladies, it's so interesting because however we describe it or where we believe the cause is, the reality is we have 5 spectacular women, including myself here, talking about this, right? And my experience as an HR professional uh, that has been working in a global environment for very long, where you found women from different countries, different cultural backgrounds, different life experience, is that this becomes a common theme, which it's quite surprising. So what I've seen myself doing all throughout my career, right, as an HR professional, was encouraging other women, right, to take the risk, to feel, stronger, to feel more powerful, uh, encouraging them to go for the next opportunity whenever they were self-doubting about themselves. Because to me, there's an element as well about uh, us internally constantly raising the bar for us. I'm sure there is an external element to it, but I also believe it has to do with our own level of willingness to excel in everything that we do, right? That makes us feel that we're never enough. And I've seen this so many times, right? To the extent that it felt painful, right? Where you look around the room like today and you go like, how can this lady say that they've had these? They're spectacular, right? So definitely that tells a story. And I think it's something that uh, for which we also have a collective responsibility of helping others recognize those sort of patterns and saying, I've been there, I've seen it in others, but you know what? You're enough, you can do it. So keep going, right? It's also very interesting to hear about those moments in leadership, right? And those barriers. I was reflecting myself and I was remembering the first time I got into an HR director role, right? Leadership one. And for me, what was like painful was the combination of the two elements. It was being the only woman in the room, but also being the younger. So in my HR role, right, I was supposed to be, coaching others, sometimes being the one giving tough feedback, right? Taking disciplinary actions, right? With men that were probably 20 years, older than myself. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to find that self-confidence of continue exercising, authority, but also doing my job. And I think what helped me overcome the barrier was preparing, right? Which I think it's something else that I've recognized as a pattern, right? I think that, we want to do a good job. So we have a tendency to get prepared properly, right? While you find others that feel more confident that go and improvise, would feel, kind of lighter. And I think sometimes we overcome some of those insecurities by being even more prepared, right? Whenever we need to make a decision, to take action, to participate in something. We're very thorough typically in what we do. And that was my way of overcoming those initial experiences that felt weird to me and definitely weird to the ones around me, because I could feel sometimes some of those, by the way, brilliant men, most of them, not all, but most of them, saying, is she going to be the one to tell me which way to go? I mean, like, seriously? I'm not sure.
Absolutely. No, and I think it's clear that everyone's in good company on kind of the imposter phenomenon theory that everyone has experienced in one shape or form. This also kind of reminds me of a study that came out last year. I believe it was from the company Textio, a management software company, where it was around 76% of high performing women received negative feedback as compared to only 2% of high performing men. There's obviously like inherent sexism all around that, society's inability to embrace and promote women into positions of power. It's a really vicious cycle. And this study was also done over 23,000 workers across, I think, over 200 or so organizations. So it wasn't a small sample set. It's clearly a larger issue. And I think as we're moving forward and looking at how we can kind of redefine leadership for future generations and approach these kind of outdated narratives that society has been placing on us, how we can open the door for others, to keep people with us, and how can we teach those who are important to us, our children, our mentees, our mentors, to do the same? Jackelyn, you have two young daughters. I feel like we had a good conversation in our prep call about a specific experience you had with your daughter and how proud you were of her of kind of breaking out of the norm.
Oh, I love the story. It makes me so proud as her mom. I would say just to use I guess her feelings doctor's words, like two things could be true at the same time. So I think when it comes to that progress, it's important for us to pause and celebrate those wins. Like when we look back, sometimes I think we were chatting, Tina, about we look back and we're like, how is it possible that it took, I don't know if it was in the 80s or 90s where women could finally wear pants to the Senate.
Yeah.
It's something ridiculous that I can't even think of, or like it was the 70s when women finally could get their own credit card without a husband, not even a partner.
Yep.
Sorry, wrong word, a husband. So I think it's important to celebrate those wins, that progress, but still say this is not okay. We're not where we need to be, and data is really important in kind of showing that. The story with my daughter kind of ties to, I would say, gender stereotypes. We were reading a book. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the series Junie B. Jones. It was written in the 90s, but the context is in the 60s. So I'm reading it thinking like, okay, this is going to be great. I didn't love some of the grammar, or it was like stinky, stupid bus, which are mean words, but I'm like, okay, developmentally appropriate. But what ended up happening is I noticed a lot of it, the majority of the roles were very gendered. So the principal was male. Mom was a homemaker, which is, again, that is fine if someone chooses that, but across the board, every single choice. The dad was the bread weight maker. The secretary was female, just like almost like an SNL comical, offensive kind of stereotype story. So I couldn't even get through the first, like maybe halfway through the book. And we always finish books. I'm like, Stevie, we can't read this. I'm so sorry. Like, let's find something else. And we did. So that was about a year ago. Fast forward 6 months later, she's in second grade and they were starting a new module, and they shared that they were going to be reading a Junie B. Jones book. And she raised her hand and was like, we don't read that in my family, which I don't think most schools like expect the little second grader to be like, not okay. She's always like, that's not okay. And she explained to her teacher why. And I got a call from the school, and then I did additional research. It turns out it was banned. And I think this is, just want to pause, it's ironic. It wasn't banned because of the gender stereotype. It was banned because of the way the girl was behaving, like her rebellious behavior is why it was banned, I think, in 2009, which to me was even more offensive because it's a child being a child and reflecting her point of view as a little girl. And because she was so rambunctious, it was banned. Whereas I suggested to the school that they ban it for the gender stereotypes. So I spoke to the school. I said, you can participate in the module. I'm not going to like disrupt their curriculum, but I did want to surface that this is not something that I think reflects the school's values or our values, et cetera. And she came home about 6 weeks later. Turns out they swapped out the book. They completely changed the curriculum because of that conversation. And I had like missed the email informing me because I'm a Red Sox person and I have so many emails. But I was so proud of her because it was me, because right, you can only control what you can control. So in terms of, I have two daughters, communicating to them what it means to stand up for what's right and what our values are, because values are so important, because of value of inclusivity, for instance, that's something conceptually that you can apply in different contexts as opposed to rules, where rules, it's hard to keep track. I'm like, I'm allowed to do this, I'm not allowed to do this. So I was so proud of her that she took that value and she raised her hand and she changed the curriculum in a second grade in a private school. So thank you for the opportunity to share that story.
Great story. It is a great story.
It's fantastic. And I think it shows obviously critical thinking, emotional capacities, being able to speak up and say, this isn't right, and I know why it's not right. So it's such an important narrative to instill in the next generation and our little future leaders to show that what's right and what's not right. I also think in terms of being empathetic, we kind of touched upon this before, Natasha, with your initial story about kind of male versus female leaders and having to remain calm. How do you feel maybe opportunities to change that, or any other kind of thoughts around the stereotypes there for emotional reactions?
I think it's important to portray empathy and emotion as not just female. I think we need to swap. I think it's the language that is often used. And so, for example, if you, I've tried this out a few times, where you ask AI and you say, what is leadership for a female and what is leadership for a male? And if you see the answers for a female, it says like, where you can influence someone to go in one common path it could be for it would be for the force of good, and it's all about empathy and kindness. And then when you look at the male, it's about you exert your influence over someone, and it could be for the force of good or bad. So I think we need to start looking at the language we use in terms of like what is inherently female, and just and move away from that language from an early age, and also in terms of how we treat young children as well, Jackelyn, because what you were saying, it reminded me of, which I loved it, by the way, but it reminded me of one of my best friends has 2 girls, and she always says to me, don't, when you see her, don't say you look pretty, say you look strong, or you were, and I think that's really important as well, is like to reinforce the qualities within our future generation of the qualities that we want them to feel that they have. And that's really important. But also what you were saying, Tina, about women, not like, if we're thinking about breaking more barriers for ourselves and also helping the future generation, what you were saying about women not applying for jobs that they're not 100% qualified for, I think that actually came from a Sheryl Sandberg book, and there wasn't any research behind it, but LinkedIn did a full research behind it to see if it was really true. And what they found was that women apply for less jobs than men. Secondly, that they usually don't apply for stretch roles. They apply for sideways jobs, or jobs that they are, that they are in this a safe bet of getting. And as a result, if you put a woman against a man on a job that they have both gone for, usually the woman gets it, but that's because they're going for those safer bets. So I think one area that we can provide more support is in helping women, A, understand what money they are worth and what money they should be going for. But secondly, what is the right career next path for them, so that they are not going for the jobs that are sideway paths and, that aren't stretch targets, and saying, you are qualified to apply for this role. You might think it's out of your reach, but you are qualified. How can we provide more of that support for them?
Absolutely. And I think that really sets us up well into our kind of next topic, which is the actions we can take to accelerate gender equity. So we're more so thinking about those actions that organizations specifically can take, especially as it relates to leadership. I mean, Sam, you've done a lot of work recently in this area with the Flow brand at She Media, especially as it relates to kind of menopause, and also not only looking at kind of the younger generation. We all know how many things under 30 programs there are, and I feel like the over 40 is kind of ignored from a lot of the leadership perspective and the development that comes there, and of course all of the physical and emotional changes that do impact us in that time of our life. I'd love to hear a bit more about your experience here.
Yeah, I think that in general there are these dips, and I don't have the precise research, but I sort of feel like Natasha might. And if everyone could like send me their stuff, I'm like trying madly to write down these data points. That would be amazing, because it's out there, but I'm like, is this something I believe? Am I the N of one sometimes, or N of my like group of 20 Brooklyn bubble people, or am I representing the whole of the 2,300 you mentioned, Tina, anyway, who were surveyed about feedback? Because I like that, the feedback. I would love to know if the people who received the negative feedback, who were women, exhibited what are stereotypically masculine traits, because I imagine they did. And you got that reaffirmation of that coming in from the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, saying we need more masculine energy, whatever that is, in the workplace. I mean, we know what he means. He means like rough and tumble and like competitive and duke it out and ridiculosity like that. But I think that is when a lot of women got dinged. And I'm older than the hills, and so I certainly adopted what were, stereotypically masculine traits early in my career, because I wanted to remain in the room. And, that's a whole sort of interesting conversation, because maybe it was effective. Maybe it makes you start really changing your personality inadvertently. But tangible things, I think reporting, and this is something I've done for the whole of, the past 20 years, report on what people earn based on gender and race and more, I think, ethnicity. There are probably going to be more things that we need to recognize, but it's just transparency in earning and transparency in hiring practices. They won't be perfect. Like, I wish I did better in having kind of insisting that everybody interview 20 people for a role and ensure that they are from truly different experiences to make us richer. But then then you've got like a hustle of I've got to hire tomorrow, and I suck because I only have my network is smaller than it should be. But I think that we published for Women's History Month, maybe Tina, I think you were with us then, salaries across the board, titles by gender and by race. And it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. We're called SheMedia. It's not that hard to like the poor men who make it to power in our company are very stalwart, very impressive humans. But it revealed a lot. Again, it's pressure to the company who had acquired us at the time to show what you're up to, and then to have that dialogue around it. So I think reporting transparently on salaries, promotions, composition of management is critical. The reason we've started focusing on menopause, in addition to just like working out my demons and ensuring that I have that the resources are available to me, because it's profoundly selfish, are same reason we addressed fertility treatments and paternity leave, because if dads don't get involved from day one, we know where that obligation is going to end up living. So we have the flexibility to create relevance and content around subject matter that impacts our workforce. And this is where the research I need from one of you guys, because my menopausal brain won't call it up, but are women dipping in the workforce over 45. There's the moment when you have, maybe if you choose to have a child, that creates that dip or stagnancy. And when Sheryl Sandberg says lean in, and there's all sorts of debate, whatever, around her contributions. But I think that the moment when you feel vulnerable because you've got in many cases a primary caregiving responsibility for a child, and then this next moment when your physiology is changing and up in arms, and as is your identity, and maybe the things that you are valued for are changing. You're becoming more expensive, and you're also at your peak of wisdom and experience. And that is when you start seeing women depart from the workforce. It's freaking amazing. Also, caregiver sandwiches, like where you have the elders care, which is 70%, I can recall, of elder care falls to women. And there's a great confluence of things happening that cause women to leave at that moment when they often would have been most primed to lead. So that's our menopause approach, is first kind of in the pyramid, like generate awareness, insist on policy changes within your organization, actually contemplate what a policy change would look like, or practices change might look like, because it's a little hard to say. Like, who wants to go in the menopause room? Like, nobody. Nobody's to be like, sign me up. Like, where breastfeeding rooms are an important space to create, or breast pumping. So we're contemplating what types of accommodations would make sense for what's known to be a wide-ranging, majority impacting physiological experience during a specific time frame, and also just to normalize the dialogue. So transparency, open conversation. You have to be really careful not to punish people inadvertently, which will happen when you say, like, I'm undergoing fertility treatments. I might feel I'm going to be in pain. I'm going to be emotionally wrought because of literally like the treatments I'm taking. I might need flexibility on schedule, and then you start sliding down in some manager's brain in terms of your credibility. I was just thinking, this is not a pride or a flex on myself. And Gina, these people, but like 3 of the women out of however many have born or gestated humans during their time at SheMedia, 3 of maybe like 20, maybe something like that, have not demanded, but justified the need for a promotion within the the trimester when they were leaving, and it successfully achieved it. So Sheila is one, Tina. Calabrese is another. Again, for the third, I'm forgetting. But anyway, I was like, look at you. I would never have done that. I would have been like silent in my cube, my office, and be like, be here. Swear to God, I'll be back tomorrow. And so I was so impressed by them, like explaining to me in PowerPoint all the reasons that they deserved a promotion. And then, they were absolutely right. But I loved seeing that. I don't know. That felt like a big change to me generationally.
Tina, could I add something to that?
Absolutely. Please.
What you said is so powerful because you mentioned Sheryl Sandberg and you also mentioned the work you're doing, and it's almost like the goalpost moves. And I think it's so important to push forward change, is that we need to be empathetic with ourselves and with each other. Like, I read Lean In, and it was life-changing for me.
Yes,
And I
at the
think a
time,
lot of folks are
totally.
forgetting. I don't seriously, and I've shared it with male allies that it completely changed their point of view. So I know there are a lot of opinions right now.
I'm with you, and I'm with you. To be
You
clear.
hear me? And even what you're saying now, you're like, ugh, I wish I would have done better. Like, Tina and I discussed this. We do the best with the data we have.
Mhm.
And I think that needs to become the guardrails that we operate within.
Yes.
We have the data we have. We're going to make decisions with that data. And we should not punish ourselves or punish other people for data changing, because that's how it works. And I think what you're doing is fantastic, because you're being very, very brave to say, hey, it's not perfect. It's not what I want eventually to happen. But like, that transparency, like, that is literally exposing yourself. And I think that is
I'm
incredible.
shocked that I'm still employed, as is everybody.
But like, kudos to you, because I think to be brave is to lead, and it's the only way that change will happen. It's the only way that this data is going to shift in the direction we need to. So it's like, be brave and be empathetic towards yourself and others, because we're all doing our best.
That's nice. I love talking to women, because you're like, okay, good. You're right. Good point. I'm going to literally reform my content. Like, we're flexible. I'm moving.
You're flexing, you're agile, and you're driving the change. It's this agile thinking now, right? We're all in tech. And I think it's really important to take that agile approach. This is not a waterfall world. It's MVP, get something out, and then let's build from that. So like, that's what I think in terms of driving change, specifically for women's rights and empowerment, is like, what's our MVP? How do we get there? And then how do we refine it? And it's okay if that first model isn't exactly what we want it to be, but how are we ever going to build that final product if we don't try?
I'm still on the preach for that, because I also think that I don't know if this is me, and I bet you guys do it too as crazy high performers, but like the shit, I did something a little better, but it's not perfect. Like, I know that I am not being fair to women who are coming from a combination of poverty, racism, gender stereotyping, and
the fact you're thinking of it is beautiful. My 5-year-old said to me last week, Mommy, practice makes progress, and maybe progress makes perfect.
Jesus, who's this
And I
child?
said, I never thought of joining those two quotes together. Like,
seriously. And when can we still have her interning?
I was like, Tina will just have the descendants at the villains of Disney. Now they have geniuses for making that villain IP valuable. Anyway, okay, I'll stop talking. Back to you.
Well, ladies, today has been a wonderful discussion, and I really, truly appreciate all of your time. We could, I think, speak for hours and hours. I'd love to invite any of you back to our podcast at any time in the future. As one final thought, since this year's topic is accelerate action, I would love to hear quickly from each of you an example of something that has inspired you, a book, a podcast, or a resource you'd recommend to our listeners that has helped influence your careers. Luisa, let's start with you.
Sure. So, listen, I would love to share a book that that was really, really impactful to me. It's called Educated by Tara Westover, which talks about the importance of education in life, right? And how education helps us broaden the world that we live on, right? And I think it has been a theme all throughout the podcast, right? There's this element around learning and raising awareness and having the conversation and bringing this type of topics for discussion on top of the table that I think makes all of us start thinking differently and bigger and broader, right? And it can feel like small little things, but I think every time we have one of these conversations, we're changing a little bit the world around us. So that's definitely a book that I would recommend. It's quite an interesting one, and it's a pretty touching story.
I love that. Perfect. Natasha, how about you? You were nodding a lot.
There's so many, but I think one which is very much in line with what we've been talking about during this podcast. It's I've been reading it recently. It's called Unbound: A Woman's Guide to Power. And it is written by Kasia Urbank. I don't want to give away too many details, but she teaches us in a practical way in the book on how to take our voices back and our power. And she draws upon her experiences as a dominatrix and a Taoist nun, as well as her opening a school to train women leaders on taking your power. So taking all of those different experiences from being a nun, dominatrix, etc., into having practical kind of like tips on taking your power.
Perfect. I love that. Jackelyn, how about for you?
Like, I guess since I'm the creative, I'm going to go a little different direction. But a book that's really helped me in my career, and I teach it at Fordham and I use it in my curriculum, is called Made to Stick. And it talks about the 6 sticky principles for communicating concepts. And I think it's so important because all of us can have ideas about how we want to enact change and how we want to communicate something. But if the way in which we communicate it is lost, kind of misses the point. So there are 6 sticky principles. One of them is making something concrete because it's the way our brains work. So I use a lot of analogies, but I highly recommend that book.
Excellent. Super important for sure. And Samantha, let's tie it up with you.
Okay, this is a great list. Infinite, but the XX Brain by Dr. Lisa Mosconi, which I probably tried to get you to read, Tina, at some point. And
Yes.
it's just really great scientific look at women's brains and just how they've been not researched. Flow, I always love. Yes, I named our new brand on this for health because I really think women don't give themselves often time to enter that space of it's a Nikkei Csikszentmihalyi Buddhist kind of philosopher background with it. We don't give ourselves time for present tense immersion. I'm terrible at it. At the XX Brain, Flow, Burn book by Kara Swisher because, she's all the things and a fun read, just like fun. And those are the ones. I'll stop there. But I thank you for these other ones. God, I'm excited. And I'm going to, all the others that you said.
Yeah, amazing. And I'll just throw in one of mine because it's super topical for me as a new mother myself. Matrescence by Lucy Jones really helped me. I recommend it to people who are new moms who had children 20 years ago. It identifies that outside of puberty, matrescence is the other physiological besides menopause as well change that happens and all the experiences around it, and that you're not alone, and all the studies or lack thereof there are globally of that very pivotal time when you're on a roller coaster emotionally. That book really really helped a lot, and I recommend it to every woman who is a mom, wants to be a mom, was a mom 30 years ago, still is a mom. It really really is impactful.
Well, thank you, Tina, for being such a great host. Will, I mean, you did very nicely. It was a pleasure, sharing the space with, you ladies. So again, I cannot believe we started talking about imposter phenomenon. I mean, it doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense to me.
You guys send me your research, please. The sharing is so useful. Or just your things. I wrote down the books.
Yes, perfect. Well, thank you again, ladies. Loved having you all, and we'll all talk soon. Thank you.